And just like that, we're into another episode here on the Long Box Punk. That's me. I'm Chris. I am joined this evening, this afternoon, this episode by Blake McCarthy. Blake, my man, thank you for hanging out with me, making time for me, and joining me here on the show.
Absolutely. I'm excited to be on. I appreciate you having me on, and excited to talk territory and punk.
Absolutely. Also, I'm super stoked you got the black hats memo. I'm so glad that we could coordinate those hats with me. But as real quick, as my hat indicates, I am a member of the nerdinitiative.com bullpen. For all things positive fandom, check out nerdinitiative.com for anything and everything that you could possibly be into. Now, Blake, as we get into everything here, we're obviously going to talk territory. We're obviously going to talk kaiju. But first, I would love to know, like, what is your origin story? How did you get into comics? How did you start creating comics? Like, how did we end up here in 2024 closing out the 5th issue of Territory?
Yeah. Well, I'm like many people who you've talked to, I'm sure. I grew up reading comics. Me, my brother, and my dad. My dad grew up reading them, and he was a big Marvel guy, so we would go to the comic shop, pretty often, and so started reading Marvel books. Kind of read that growing up. That really was when I, got into comics. Loved, especially Marvel was mostly what I read, so that was sort of my jam when I was a kid. And then it was kind of funny because then actually as I became sort of into my teens and early 20s, kind of went away from it a little bit, just kind of got into some other stuff. But then I've got 2 kids, a 10-year-old and a 5-year-old. And when my son started kind of getting into the superheroes, that got me kind of back into comics. And I was like, oh yeah, these are still awesome. But it was cool because I had done just done a little bit of like screenwriting type stuff in college. And so I was like, well, this is, really cool. Like I had never really thought about writing a comic before, but, kind of getting back into them. And then Territory was kind of a story I'd had, loosely in my head for a while. And I was like, this seems kind of like the perfect way to tell this story. So just kind of, started getting into it. Once I found like kind of the Kickstarter community and the indie comics community, that was another door that opened up of like, oh, you don't have to go through this big thing. Like you can, there's people out here doing this. And it was real helpful. A lot of people, a lot of people, a lot of resources on how to kind of get into it. And so just kind of jumped in, decided I wanted to do it. And yeah, it's crazy. This is, it's been 4 years basically working on Territory. Like I said, a couple of years before that, as far as like when I started to, have the idea and start to put things together. But now that we're here, I'm so glad I did and really excited to be able to finish this up.
That's awesome. You said a few things that I want to unpack. And also, like, I'm really excited for the 5th issue. After I was thinking a little bit more about it, I'm pretty sure I joined issue 2 and did the catch-up tier, and then every issue since, I've been supporting Territory. I love kaiju and the post-apocalyptic world that you've created with the tribalism and the different kaiju that are coming in, and the humans are both worshiping and terrified of the kaiju. I just think it's so much fun to do and get into, and really like an unlimited space that you can kind of let your artist go free with like creating these wild freaking kaiju. So I love all of that, and I want to dig into a lot of that. But I love that you said when you started getting into comics, you were going with your dad and your brother, and then it was your son that got you going as a dad back into comic. Like that's such a cool, like full circle thing. I also like grew up going with my dad. We tried to get my sister into it, who was 3 years older than me, and she was just like, nah, I don't care. And so my dad and I kept going, and then I tried bringing my daughter, and like it worked for a little bit, and I was getting her the like My Little Pony comics and like SpongeBob comics, and so I tried to get her into some of them, but then she very quickly was like, Dad, this ain't it for me. And I was like, okay, all right.
Well, that's the funny thing about being a dad, and it is really cool. Like it's felt very full circle for me. Like obviously, I give both my dad and my mom have been very supportive. They think it's cool that I'm making comics now, and it's kind of cool, being able to be like, hey, there's this, this thing that we kind of grew up on. Like now I'm doing it, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And then it is funny though, as a parent, because you're like, you want your kids to make the decision for themselves and everything, but you also want to be like, hey, like check out this stuff. I look at all this cool stuff. Like come check it out. And and it's funny because so there was about probably 5 or 6 years ago that my son was really into superheroes. So he's 10 now, and he's not like he still likes it all right, but it's definitely not, he was in like that phase and it was perfect. My daughter, she's 6 years old, and this, kind of same thing. Like she thinks it's cool, but even though neither of them is really into the overall comic books, they both love Territory. They think it's super cool. And that's another really cool part of it as a dad is, not only doing it to say that, to kind of prove to myself that, hey, I can do it. I can tell these stories that I want to tell, but showing my kids, hey, if you have something you want to do, whether it's comics or storytelling, or, if there's something that you want to do that you're passionate about, like if you put the effort in, you can do it. And so that, being able to sort of send that message and then follow through and show them like, hey, look, this is, you can do it. You can, as long as you're willing to put the work in, you can make it happen. And that's something that I'm really proud of with it, is that, hopefully that's a message that sticks with them, throughout their life of like, yeah, it is, it is something. If you want to do something, you just got to put in the work.
That's awesome, man. You're going to get me feeling all the feels over here. That's like, that's so critical that, not only are you seeing those wins as the dad, but then also that you're like turning around and sharing that with them and like, hey, this matters. Like, it's not just me. I'm not a fluke. Like you can do this thing too. Like, man, talk about an inspirational kick in the pants. I love that. You also mentioned once you got into like the indie comics community, and this is a very through line of just about every conversation that I've had, where it's always creators that are saying, yeah, I started connecting with people on social media and, through conventions and making friends that way. And I just had a lot of help figuring out this crowdfunding thing. Like, were there specific people that kind of stepped into those roles, or were you just like learning from all of the different things as you went, like by osmosis?
I mean, it's definitely a little bit of both. Like, I think you definitely want to go into that with sort of that sponge mindset, and not to go back to being it, but that's another great thing about, when your kids are into something, and when you start to, when you have kids and when you're around them and when you're working with them, like you realize like they look at the world still with that wonder, and they are so, they're so open and they're so excited to learn about everything, and they want to learn about everything. They want to do everything. They want to try everything. And as an adult, that's really inspiring, because you kind of lose that somewhere along the way. We all get cynical, stuff happens, life happens, all that. But then once you kind of see them, it's like, oh yeah, like, if you approach things with sort of that openness, yeah, it opens a lot of doors for you. But there definitely were some creators, so I went on Kickstarter, and I knew I wanted to do the Kaiju book and all that. So I started following, looking at creators that had done, Kaiju stuff. So like Ross Radke, he's done Stomped, Stephen Prince with Monster Matador. Those were a couple of the big ones. And then, some like Kat Kalamia, I think is how you say her name, or Nicole DeAndrea, who's the editor for Territory, who had some experience in the space before, who I talked to, asked some questions. And there's definitely been like a variety of creators who, either reached out with as some sort of promotional collab, or just, telling them you like their stuff, or there's just a lot of people who put a lot of stuff out there. So it's definitely been some specific people, but overall I'd say just, getting in and just exploring, finding sort of what you like, and then, being able to take what you like and what speaks to you and applying that to your stuff. That's been my main strategy.
It's interesting that you learned that even before you were getting into any of it, because I just learned like, wait a second, why aren't I just like searching for like punk rock comics? Because, I've been a long fan of Travis Gibb and the Granite State Punk, and like that combines the, punk rock and magic. And I loved his series, and I, found some others that I just really enjoyed. Most recently, like Drumsticks of Doom and the Cryos. And it was just like by searching, punk or punk rock in Kickstarter, Indiegogo or whatever, that I then found these books, and I was like, why haven't I been doing this for like, I've been a super backer on Kickstarter for like 2 or 3 years,
Mhm.
and backing books for 5, 6 years now. Why haven't I been searching for these things this entire time? Like, and that's just as a fan of a reader, but to do that as a creator, like, that's next level. Like, that's just super smart planning on your part to be searching for those books.
Well, and I wish I could say it was all this grand plan, but I think that's what's so cool about Kickstarter and the indie space is the people that are writing these. The people write books of the stuff they're fans of. Like, it's not, and I do still enjoy some mainstream comics, but I do mostly read Kickstarter comics now because I feel like every Kickstarter book I've read, you can tell that somebody wrote that because they wanted to write that book. There's no other, there's nothing else tied to it. So like every Kickstarter book is, somebody's passion project. And so just getting, you always know you're getting that passion, you're getting the excitement. And especially then once you start, looking a little bit deeper on the creators and then, especially as a creator, and you start being like, okay, well, what are they doing? What are they doing to make this project so successful, to help get the word out, to make it feel like it is, this thing that you can be a part of. And then you just get like, it's inspiring that way too. Cause you're like, okay, yeah, like I have this idea or I have this story, but it can be bigger than that. And there's ways to do it. You just got to, kind of figure out what speaks to you. Cause again, I think it's one of those things that it's hard to say, this is what you need to do, or here's the plan. You just need to see what you like and what speaks to you, and then apply that to yours. Because that's, if you're doing it that way and you're, saying, hey, this is what I like and I want to share that with you, like people pick up on that.
Yeah, for sure. So tell me, I'm going to hit this. We've got your campaign launching on September 24th, just a couple days from now. And so I'm going to solo you, and I'm going to have you just give us your give me your elevator pitch. Really, like, tell me what's going on and why people should check out the campaign. And then I'll be right back with you. I got to fix some allergy stuff.
No worries. So Territory is a post-apocalyptic kaiju epic where the people worship the kaiju as gods. So it's a 5-issue miniseries. This next campaign is for the 5th issue, but it'll also have all 5 issues for people who haven't been a part of the previous campaigns. So you'll get the entire story, and basically it follows Alkia, and then she's part of the Great Horn tribe. The Great Horn's this kaiju right behind me here. And so these kaiju have sort of come up. They're called behemoths in the comic. Yes, that's the symbol right there, that pin. So the kaiju have kind of come up after this post-apocalyptic event sometime in the past, and the remaining people that survived that event now just follow them around and worship them as gods. And so the first time that Alkia and her tribe sees the Great Horn is the first sighting in a generation. So they go on this pilgrimage, but then they see another kaiju. And so then there's a couple kaiju battles, and I'm not going to really spoil too much further, but basically, so it's not just a kaiju book, not just post-apocalyptic book, but it's sort of a book about coming of age, of disillusionment, of the dangers of just sort of being indoctrinated into something and not experiencing the wider world. And so it's really a growth story for Alkia, and I'm really excited in this 5th issue to finish her character arc and see where she comes out of it.
That's great. Yeah, it really is like, it was the kaiju and these massive battles and the idea of being set in this crazy post-apocalyptic world that drew me in. And then it was the character, like, it sounds cheesy and very cliche, but like, it really was the character writing that you're doing that kept me coming back, because it was like, man, these characters are going through a lot. Like, they're facing, what happens when they are face to face with this kaiju that they worship as a god. Like, what would you even do if I was in that story and then suddenly had this kaiju crash into my world? Like, oh, what do you do with that? So I love the journey that they've been on, and the other tribes that now they're starting to come into contact with as well. It adds a lot of really great tension, and it's got some really great character designs. And like the chief that we see in issue 4
Mm-hmm.
with the giant, with his cloak that's got the hood and it looks like it's just got a bunch of teeth. Like, specifically with that design, because it, for me, it was just like, man, that's really, really cool. It's a striking image. That's the phrase. So like when coming up with the kaiju and the great horn and even the character designs, like how involved are you with that as opposed to, you know, giving your artist the premise and letting them come up with the designs like from ground zero?
Yeah, so I've been really lucky. So we've had two artists on the book. Chris Sassman was the artist for issues 1 through 3. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to continue, and so we got Donnie Hadiwajaja, who did issue 4, and then he'll be doing issue 5, the final issue as well. And so, fortunately, they've both been really amazing. And as far as character design, it's been largely on them. Like in the script, I would have a description of the characters, like for the Great Horn, like a description of sort of what I had pictured in my head. And just sort of, for like Alkia and Nebo and some of the main characters, had a somewhat specific, but I also kind of intentionally wanted to leave it open-ended. So as far as like, I wanted to give some detail about like, this is sort of, what they'll be wearing, or this is what their environment's like. So they need to fit their environment, but then letting the artist just kind of go crazy as far as like with the design. And it's been really like they did an amazing job. So with the kaiju specifically, with some of the themes of the book, as far as sort of like, a nature retaking after a human disaster and all that, I wanted the kaiju to feel very naturalistic. I didn't want to go quite as much into like some of the sci-fi realm that kaiju can get into. And so I wanted them to be sort of this mutated, monstrous kind of feel. And so, it was going and for each one, the main idea was sort of picking some animals specific to the regions, because the tribes are kind of based off different tribes from different regions, and then the kaiju are based off some animals in that regions, and then sort of mutating them together. But like Chris did the design for the first for all 3 kaiju, and he did an amazing job. Like I gave him a description, of here's generally what I want, but what he drew was so much cooler than what I had on the page or what I had in my head. So it was really, really cool to, see that come to life and see him add so much life to them. And I think, with any kaiju book, like I said, or like you said, the characters are great and it's fun to read, but like, if you don't have a cool looking kaiju, people just aren't going to read the book. And he did such a good job of creating these awesome and really unique looking kaiju that it definitely sucks people in, and they feel very appropriate for the world too. And then Donnie was the one that did most of the design for the new tribe, since they were, really introduced in the 4th issue. And, I mean, same thing, I had a general idea, and like with that cloak and stuff, kind of talked about a ceremonial cloak in a little bit of detail. But then when he came out with that, it was like, yes, that's amazing. that looks so cool. So, it's, as a writer, I feel like with comics specifically, that's the cool thing is you have an idea in your head, and you can sort of give a general idea, but then seeing that art come back really, takes it to the next level.
Yeah. Yeah. That's super awesome. And like, was it different working with, Chris on the first 3 and then a different artist on the 4th and 5th issues? Like, how did that transition work for you?
So fortunately, it was really, really smooth. Donnie had actually worked with Ich-san and Sori, who's the colorist. He's been the colorist on all of our issues. And so when Chris wasn't able to continue, it was definitely like, okay, this, we'll see how this goes.
Yeah.
But so actually Ich-san I talked to Ich-san about him, and Donnie has been amazing. Like it's been a really smooth transition. He, working with Ich-san before, I think helped a lot. Like they have a good working relationship already. And the colorists and Ich-san have done such, colorists in general are so important for like the atmosphere of a book, I feel. And Ich-san has done such a good job of creating this really cool world and atmosphere for Territory. And so I think him being able to kind of work with Donnie helped smooth that out a lot, as far as like they kind of knew the atmosphere, and then obviously he knew the characters and stuff. But I think it was kind of cool that he also got some kind of new characters to, experiment with and put his touch on, so that it's something that when you're reading it, it's not jarring or it doesn't take you out of the story, but you definitely get, the feel of both artists. So I feel really lucky that it went as well as it did.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. It was definitely something that I wanted to bring up because it is so much like, yes, you've got your main characters from your main tribe, but then also like it does feel very ensemble in the book with all the characters that you've got, and each issue has had its own kind of front facing main characters. And so I was curious then to see like how that translated from, you know, going from Chris working on it and being very close to it with the first three and then Donnie in the second two. But it's great that like there's already that pre-existing relationship, so it was like a that piece fits very easily into that puzzle. So I love that because yeah, I didn't notice, like I reread the first four in prep for talking to you, and it I really didn't notice like there was no, I knew it was different artist, but there was it was still like this is the exact same world that I have gotten to know in the first three. Like all of the same parameters are there. The kaiju still look great in issue four. Like all of that stuff is still there. So just, I mean, top marks for blending all that together and smoothing everything out.
Well, thanks. Like I said, it was pretty lucky, you know, and that's the great thing about comics is it is such a team thing, and you know, especially as a new creator, you know, so being very like I've relied a lot on, you know, people who have had more experience because you know they're teaching me, or when I'm not sure of something, that's who I can go to. And you know, so Ichsan having some of that experience, being able to work through with something like this, and Chris was a very new artist, so that was kind of cool, you know, as a new, we were both new creators, so that was cool. But then having a veteran artist come in and be able to pick up where he left off and not have to, you know, sort of start over with all of that now that we kind of had something established, was really important. So like, and Donnie has been so good, so professional. His artwork's been amazing. And like you said, because I think one big thing with comics is you need that consistency, or else then it starts to take you out of the story. And he kept the consistency. I like that, you know, they feel unique but consistent, and that was the goal. So
Yeah. Yeah, because I have also noticed even with like mainstream comics, where the creative teams, it feels like every 3 to 5 issues, they're just like, yeah, different. And they'll change out the artist or they'll change out the writer. And it always feels very like, well, let's start with a flashback to give you a completely different feel. And then even when we return back to the same timeline that we were in, it's just going to be different, but you're not going to notice because we did the flashback first. It's like,
right.
you're not hiding that from anybody.
No, and it's hard to stay, you know, it's hard as a reader to really stay involved in the story at that point because it takes you out of it. And you've got to like, you know, because anytime you read anything, you got to sort of take that step into that world. And
Yeah.
so if something puts you out of it, it's hard to re-enter that, I feel like. And so that was, you know, that was definitely a concern I had, but you know, like I said, I just feel very lucky that, you know, with Ichsan and with Donnie, you know, they've done such a good job, and you know, we were able to make it seamless. And yeah, and that's the thing is, you know, talking to people who have read the book, like nobody has been like, yeah, you know, man, the art change or anything like that. Like everyone's been like, yeah, you know, like I noticed it was different, or I saw that this is different, but it, you know, it works. It's cool. I like it. And so it's like, all right, we're still on track.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell me what you've got planned, or as much as you can share with this final issue. Like, what can readers expect that have been reading the series so far?
Definitely. So this is going to be a 32-page issue. So all the first four have been 22 pages. So this is going to be our behemoth-sized finale. And like I said, the big thing that I'm really excited about is that this does wrap up the story, the character arcs really well, and especially Alkia. You know, Alkia is the main character of this story. She's been a really fun character to write because she's, you know, obviously there's a lot of sort of what I think in her, but it's also been interesting sort of writing the story, and as the story's grown and as she's grown, changed to her story, you know, just sort of getting in her mindset and trying to think like her. And I feel like now I've got to, you know, at this point I have a very good feel for, you know, who she is as a character. Mm-hmm. And like you said, I've even had other artists coming like, man, this poor girl, like she's been through a lot. And she has, you know, the first 4 issues are not kind to her. And, you know, and obviously it's not going to be all sunshine and rainbows, but you know, her story arc does come to an end. And I really love, you know, the new cover by Donnie has her standing on top of this great horn skull.
Yeah.
And I think like that's really a great symbol for sort of what this issue does. Of she finally sort of gets to sort of conquer, you know, who she is, her own beliefs, everything else. She's been influenced by so many people. She's been put through so much, and at the end of it now, she's coming out, you know, as who she is, as her own person. And that's, I think, the most exciting part of it. There's also a couple, you know, there's a couple cool kaiju parts, some stuff that I think will be very exciting for people who have been following along, especially gotten attached to these characters, gotten, you know, and one thing about this book is it's not constant kaiju. You know, we tried to use them in points to make them as effective as possible. And so what we use them for in this last issue, I think is really powerful and really cool, and will satisfy people who are, you know, who are in it this far with us.
That's awesome. Yeah, because even thinking back, like for me, the benchmark of like the two greatest kaiju that I grew up watching were the original King Kong movie and Godzilla.
Mm-hmm.
And like while both are similar, you can definitely tell a difference where King Kong felt very much to me like human stories that just happens to feature this giant ape. And then Godzilla, it was like, oh, we as humans did some terrible things, and now we have to deal with the repercussions of this giant lizard attacking everything and destroying everything. And it's how they react to him being in the world. And I feel like Territory lands for me somewhere in the middle, where they're reacting to, oh gosh, this kaiju just came smashing into our world. And then also like the human element of like, what does that mean for us as humans? And so like finding the balance between the two of those is why like this series has been like, when I saw like, oh, issue 5, the final issue, like, damn man, come on. Because I really love what you've done with this story and with these characters. And so like I'm excited to read the final issue and be able to say like, here's the full set, and then I can sit and be a purist and read all 5 back to back to back, which I'm definitely going to do. So but you've also had some really awesome like variant covers. I've never seen until your campaigns the black light, like the prints and stuff that you're doing with the blacklight work, like that's super rad. And if I'm cheating, which I'm totally going to do, like,
oh, please,
the image that I'm just going to show it. You know what? I have the technology. We can do this. I didn't plan to do this, so it might take me just a second, but we're going to go here and we're going to go here, and we want to show this. Yep. So
but I know what image you're gonna show.
Like, if we're just looking at the Kickstarter, your pre-launch page, like how freaking cool is that image of the Great Horn? Like, and is that one of the blacklight sensitive images?
Yeah, so this is a little piece, and I actually just sent over. This is a piece of the cover from Martha Womersley. So she has done a cover for every issue. You know, she started with issue 1, and like you said, she has, I think, one of the coolest, most unique art styles I've ever seen, and I've just been so happy and excited to have her as a part of Territory throughout, because I feel like, yeah, what her stuff is just so eye-catching and so totally different and unique than what's out there, that it's been really cool. And this last cover, which this image is from, that's on the pre-launch page, is a perfect summary of sort of what she's done to this point. So the first 3 issues, and it worked out, the first 3 issues all introduced a new kaiju. And so her cover for each of those was her take, which has this sort of, like you said, neon blacklight kind of feel to it, of each of the different kaiju. And then for issue 4, you had the Great Horn in the background, and then it actually had Alkia, which was really cool to see her include the human character as well. For this 5th issue, what she's got is she did the 3 kaiju again, but this time all together, and they're basically forming this totem-like, piece. And so you've got the Great Horn there, and then Aquamassis is under it, and then the model Ishiki. Yeah, there you go. So that's going to be her cover for this issue, and it's just such a perfect summary of, her work incorporating all the kaiju, using all of those colors that she uses so effectively to really, make this incredible design. And I love the totem feel for it. With Territory was definitely inspired by, like native myths and legends, and also just with the religious element in general. The totem feel is such a good kind of summary of so much of that's going on in the book. And so, it's cool because having her throughout the whole thing, having her do a cover for each one, like there's definitely backers who will, who have bought her cover every time and want her art prints. And, I think like they're in Territory as much for her art as much for anything else. And that's because it's so cool. It's so unique. You don't see art like this on comics, hardly ever.
Yeah.
And to get this sort of, kind of final piece that brings it all together, I love it. I'm really excited. Like, I can't wait till I get to hold it and see it in hand, because it does, man. Like, especially with the physical books with these covers, they just pop, and they're, like if you put them in your collection next to your other books, like these ones just stick out because they are so vibrant and cool and unique. So this will be one of the covers for the final issue. And I'm definitely really, really glad that we were able to get her to do one for all 5.
Yeah, that's that again, that's like the consistency of having her do a cover for every book has just been like, I love seeing those covers. Usually I'm just give me the original cover, because for me, like I've never been a huge variant guy.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's always like, well, give me the cover that was originally designed for the book, because like that was probably the purest like idea that the creative team had for representing their book. So I'm always like, now just take the basic cover. But then as I get more and further into these Kickstarters, like I don't feel the need to collect every cover possible. But when I see a cover like that, I'm like, I really like that cover, but like, do I break the mold? Because now I've got the 4 of the original, and now would I just do the 5th one in that one? Or like if there's a print, maybe I can add that, because I'm just breaking all the rules I normally do. I do have a Territory cover print over here that's like
Oh,
hidden
yep.
in under the Thundercats there.
Yeah, see it down there in the middle. Yep.
And so like man, this is just an episode of all nonsense. But like when I got that poster, I was like, I have to get this up. Like it's got the kaiju, and I love this story, and so it's there all the time with all my other artwork, and I love it. So like, maybe is it going to be a print that I can get and add that
Yes.
to? Yes. All right.
Yeah, so that's with this, that was the other thing with this campaign, is because we've been very fortunate that we have had, we've got like, the cool thing is there's, definitely like kind of a fan base now, right? There's people who I've talked to like yourself who have, been in it from the beginning or very early. And, and like I said, there's people who like her art specifically, and it's been so cool to talk to people who just really enjoy the project. And so with this campaign, I really wanted to make sure I went through all 4 previous campaigns, talked to some people who, have been big supporters of the project, and really tried to find out, what do people like about Territory? Like obviously the book, but what else do people like about it? As sort of a brand, what do they want? Like, how can I make this campaign as satisfying as a thank you to everyone who has supported us to get here, to finish this? How can we give them, what they want? And art prints, definitely one of the biggest things. So yeah, there'll be art prints, bookmarks, cards, so all this stuff is going to be very art focused, because I think, the art is just with any comic, but definitely, so proud of the art team on this one.
Yeah.
So everything will be very art focused, but we'll have, a variety of things. So pins like the one you've got there, so trying to look and see what people have enjoyed from the previous 4 campaigns, and not only give them more of that, but we've really tried to we're trying to include sort of, a premium version of everything we can in this, as far as like, hollow cards, hollow bookmarks, enamel, like just making everything as nice as we can. Again, as a thank you, just thank you for supporting us. Thank you for helping us get here. We hope this is, what you want based on what we've seen so far. This is what people want. And so that's really the goal with this one.
That's cool. That's really like, I think that's really neat as a creator to have that appreciation and not lose sight of like it's the crowdfunding people and the crew of followers and the readers and fans that you've got that have allowed this book to get to issue 5 instead of fizzling after 2 or 1 even. Because I know a lot of times an issue 1 will do really well on Kickstarter, and then the second issue seems like an uphill battle the entire time, because there's always a drop off on the second one, I would imagine, after the third one and fourth one. So the fact that you've got the 5th issue coming out and you've already got what was it when I just shared that, like you're encroaching on 100 followers on the pre-launch, which is awesome. I know that that's always like a target for creators to have, is like, let's get to 100 followers. And then like there's something magical about that 100 marker. So if you're listening or watching this and you haven't followed the pre-launch, like you still got 2 more days before it takes off. And then also like when it takes off, let's hopefully get this campaign a really strong start and back it on day 1. Because you know you're gonna, I know I'm in, like I already know I'm gonna back it. It's just a matter of how much I'm gonna be backing at this point. So with Territory and creating Kaiju, like is there a specific Kaiju outside of Territory that you always have just been a fan of?
I mean, it's cliche, but it's got to be Godzilla, right? I mean, that's everyone, you know, that's baby's first Kaiju. That's what everyone grows up with and sees. But so yeah, and Godzilla's definitely been, you know, the main influence. And you know, I grew up watching Godzilla. I've loved Godzilla. Godzilla's had, you know, a lot of great comic books. And what it's really cool right now, because I feel like, you know, it's really, there's a lot of great Godzilla stuff right now. Like it's just a good time. The fan base, I think, is strong, and there's a lot being created for it. So Godzilla is definitely the number one. But there, you know, and what's cool though is with sort of, and I think there's kind of 2 things. There's, you know, one, just with the internet, the fan bases are able to sort of, you know, spread stuff more. So like I've gotten into a lot more Kaiju, just kind of get it, you know, starting with Godzilla, but then obviously like King Kong, like you said, but Gamera, Daimogen, and, you know, just so much cool Japanese stuff is available right now. Yeah. And then the other cool part of it is with Kickstarter and these indie creators, you have all the other people that were, you know, fans of Kaiju too, and now they're creating, you know, Kaiju comics or books or movies or whatever. And Kickstarter has had a ton of great ones. You know, I mentioned earlier Monster Matador, Stomped. There's, you know, a couple other ones, Age of Man, Kaijus and Cowboys. Like there's a bunch of Kaiju books on Kickstarter. So if you're a fan of it, like it's great to just be able to go on and find so much cool stuff, you know. And it's, again, you can, like I said earlier, it's people who are passionate about it. You can tell they're Kaiju fans, so they're making Kaiju projects because they just think it's cool. And so when you read their stuff, you get that passion, you get that love. And so it's been cool, you know, it all started with Godzilla, and that's definitely what was the main influence. But there's definitely so much other Kaiju stuff out there now that I'm always kind of seeing stuff and being like, oh, that's cool. Like, is that, you know, does that have something that I can kind of, you know, incorporate or something like that?
Yeah, that's awesome. And I love, so Monster Matador is another one that I've been following. Here recently, I was late to the bus on that one, but now that I got on the bus, like I'm all in for that series. That's super fun. I actually talked to Frankie Washington with Kaiju and Cowboy. Like he's a post-punk himself. We had a great talk as well, talking about Godzilla and Kaiju in general and anime and manga.
Yeah.
And so it's
been doing it for a long time. He knows, he's so knowledgeable and so cool to talk to.
Yeah, if anybody listening to this hasn't checked it out and you want to be brought to school on like how to be a professional artist, Frankie took me to school. Like it was just 40 minutes of him just like dropping so much knowledge. And I was just like, I don't have any more space for what you're telling me. Like my sponge is full and you're still like just scratching the surface of what that guy has been through and knows. And it like just it blows my mind.
100%. Well, and he's such a great, like he's another one that, you know, he's like, because he loves teaching people, he loves helping people, you know, and you can just tell. And that's like there's so many people in the community like that, and it's cool to see that he's because he's been doing this, he's worked on so many cool things, and so it's cool to see like he's getting to do this really cool passion project with Kaijus and Cowboys, and so it's just those kind of creators are so inspiring to kind of follow and learn from, and because they do have so much to give.
Yep, I completely agree. Are there like writers that you also like have a close pulse on? This is more for me at this point, like, because I know on your Twitter you were like, hey, so territory is coming, but like in the meantime, here's some other really awesome kaiju campaigns that are going on right now. And like, as a fan of kaiju, I love that you do that. As a fan of kaiju, my wallet hates that you did that, because now I'm going to be checking out all of those campaigns, because it is definitely like a genre that I think is so much fun. So are there other like writers that are in that space? I know we talked about Frankie and we mentioned Monster Matador with Stephen Prince.
Yes.
Like he's all over the place, and our schedules just haven't aligned to get him on yet. But Stephen, if you're watching this, we need to figure that out. Shameless, man. I have to be shameless. But like, are there other like creators that are in the kaiju space that you've worked with or talked about, even like potentially teaming up with?
So yeah, those are definitely some of the big ones. Like I said, another one, I'm just kind of pulling up my Kickstarter here to make sure I don't miss anybody.
Sure.
Chris McDonald with his Daikaiju Rumble, that's a really cool looking project. It's like a light novel, so it's going to be a little bit different, but I'm really excited to check that out for that reason. And he's definitely been he's been a big supporter of Martha Womersley, who's done the Territory comics and stuff like that. So, just kind of seeing him, interacted with him online kind of through the Kaiju space. As far as a couple other ones, Tim Daniel did one a little bit ago called Enormous. That was really cool. And that was cool. It was kind of republished. I love Andrew McLean. He did Headlopper, which is more of like a fantasy thing, but he's done some Godzilla work. And then he actually put out probably a year or so ago now, an independent kaiju book called Snarlagon, which was amazing. He's just one of my favorite creators in general. And, you can tell he's a kaiju fan. So it's, there's not, it's, and like I said, it's not, there's someone that I'll follow, and then I see something else, and then I follow that. And so it's, it's hard to say, cause I don't really have like one or two specific influences, but just trying to, that's what's cool about Kickstarter, is just kind of checking in, seeing all the new stuff that's popping up. Cause a lot of time it is somebody that I haven't necessarily, heard of or interacted with. But then I look into their stuff and I'm like, whoa, this is really cool. And, they're obviously a fan of this too. We like kind of the same things. And so you kind of start checking them out, and you get to, kind of get that influence too. So like Steven, Frankie, those are some of the big ones that Ross Radke, again, with Stomp, that was one of the first ones I backed. Those are three that, I kind of, when I was starting my Kickstarter journey, I got into pretty early and have kind of stayed consistent with. But like I said, I also love just so many, the fact that there's so many and so many people creating. And so being able to sort of learn from all these different people all the time.
Yeah. So are kaiju comics, like, is that your sweet spot even as a reader, or is there another genre that, if it's not kaiju, if you had to pick something other than kaiju, like, is there another genre that you're just like, I can't get enough of it?
So I obviously I love the kaiju books, but it's definitely not the only thing I read. Post-apocalyptic, I'd say, is actually probably a bigger genre for me as far as reading and just in general. I feel like with a post-apocalyptic world, you can do so many different things with it, right? Like you can, the apocalypse itself can be so many different things. And then it basically gives you sort of this fresh new world. And, some people have done so many different things with that. So definitely a big fan of post-apocalyptic media. That's probably, if I had to pick like a genre, that's probably the biggest one. I do try to, in general, not stick to any one genre too much, because I feel like you can kind of, pigeonhole yourself. I haven't been very good about getting into some of the like slice of life stuff, or, some of the stuff that's more popular, but I'm trying to expand my boundaries and trying to try some new things, just to see. But if I had to pick one genre, I'd say post-apocalyptic.
I love post-apocalyptic. A lot of the recent, so I am a terribly slow like actual reader, like just a prose novel. But audiobooks, I drive a lot for like work and family stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
I crush audiobooks, and
Yes.
I went through a huge dystopian, like post-apocalyptic kick where I listened to like all of the Hunger Games, which I just unashamedly love. I listened to the Divergent series. I listened to the Maze Runner books. I listened to oh god, the Helldivers series by Nicholas Sansbury Smith, and like listened to all of these different books and just got like super into all of them. And I was just like, oh, this is its own thing. Like, I want more to do with all of these things. Like, how do I get more of this stuff? And so then, it was that like I found one author, and then that spiraled into another author. And then now, like, every time I get any recommendations from Libby, which is the free to use library app
Love
for
it.
audiobooks,
Love it.
like, I don't know why anybody, I always have people like, oh, I'm waiting for my next free credits on Audible. I'm like, why? Go to Libby. Like, it's already free.
Yep.
But
That's how I do most of mine too.
it's the best thing. Like, it's the best. I listen to probably 30 to 45 audiobooks a year, and I don't pay for any of them, and it's totally legal, and I love it. It's great.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And I agree with you, because that's actually one thing. As I got back into comics, I was reading those a lot, but I wasn't really reading as much in general at that point. And so getting back into reading novels has definitely, I think, been one of, if not the biggest things that's helped me grow as a creator too, just because, comics are great and amazing, but I think, sitting down, reading a novel or listening to a novel, because I do the same thing. Anytime I'm driving, that's usually what I'm listening to now. And it's great because you can, even if you're strapped for time, it gives you a way to still read, which is, so good. But yeah, getting back into that, I think just really helped me think about storytelling and structure and just all the things you need to effectively tell a story. A quick recommendation, just based on some of the stuff you said. I don't know if you've read the Broken Earth series by N.K. Jemisin. But
So.
it's sort of fantasy, sort of post-apocalyptic, but very, very, very good. A lot of really interesting kind of themes, and her world building is absolutely amazing. So definitely one, like, if you're into that, I think it would be a cool one to add to the list. They're long, they're like 15 hours, but they're worth it.
That's fine. Yeah, that's been the average of the books that I'm listening to. So 12 to 15 is usually my sweet spot. So, and I could talk audiobooks all day because I'm a huge bibliophile, and I'm just like, I'm surrounded by books in my office, and I've got even more downstairs, and digital ones on my phone that I'm probably never going to get to. So.
That's the problem, man. There's too much good stuff now. It's like, oh, I want to do this. Oh, I want to do this. And then before you know it, you're like, well, I have to decide to do something, because otherwise I'm just going to look at all this cool stuff and be, not sure.
Like, I gotta focus. I just need to focus on doing this one thing, and like, it even goes with my comics. Like, I've got a stack of Kickstarter rewards that I've gotten that I haven't read yet.
Yep.
I've got a stack of like my monthly pulls that I have that's dwindling because I'm pulling less and less and just waiting for trades because I'm out of space. I have 12 long boxes in my office and I don't have any more room. And so I'm just waiting for trades, but then I still have back issues that I got to fill in. I still have holes in my collections that I got to pick up. So I have a separate stack for that. And I'm like, I just need to focus on reading one thing.
100%. Yeah. I like have to binge read my Kickstarter rewards, because as one comes in, I'm like, oh, that's cool, but I need to read the other one that I backed last year, but I was going to wait until I read this thing. And so then I eventually hit a point where I'm like, all right, I'm just going to read all of these right now, because otherwise I'm not going to get to them. So
Yep. Yeah. I've got my stuff broken. I have an embarrassing amount of like books that I haven't read. Cause again, I like, between doing this show and working a regular 9 to 5, and then plus having a side job as well, in like video production, and then, being a husband and a father and all those things, like, I just don't have the time to do it. And then when I do, I just feel just stuck, and I end up playing stupid games on my phones for 3 hours instead of like, reading comics for that 3 hours. But yeah, I it's even like broken down into like, if I could just get my recent releases done, I would feel a sense of accomplishment. If I could just get the like series that I bought as a bundle at conventions, I would feel accomplished if, if I could, and that's just the forever challenge of an ADHD year is like, if I could just have a day where I could focus, I would get so much done. And then I don't.
Well,
And
and even then, though, then you read about some other new cool thing that you hadn't heard of. You're like, well, now I gotta check that out too, and it's always growing, and even if you get through some of it, you're like, cool. Then you look over, you're like, wow, I still have a long way to go, and it's I've given up on ever fully getting there. I'm like, oh, I'll try to enjoy things when I get to them. That's the goal. Just enjoy it when I get there.
yeah, when I feel the mental capacity that I
Yes,
can sit down and enjoy, I just need to sit down and enjoy. And
exactly.
lucky for me, I have a lot of options.
Yes, exactly. That's the great thing. Never short on stuff to look at. So.
Right. So we talked about audiobooks, but we haven't talked about music yet. Like, do you find when you listen to music, if you listen to music, like, do you feel or find inspiration in the music that you're listening to?
Yeah, and it's cool with Territory. I actually kind of got into some music that I hadn't really ever gotten into before. So mostly, if I'm just listening to it for just hanging out or working out or whatever, I mostly prefer hip hop. But with Territory, I wasn't really able to write real well. Just the lyrics and the someone talking a lot distracted me,
Yeah.
and so I was kind of looking for something without vocals to write to, and it got me eventually to post rock, and that is something that I had never really listened to, but now I absolutely love. It's my focus music not only when I'm writing, but when I'm doing a lot of things now. So a couple bands in particular, God is an Astronaut, or If These Trees Could Talk. And it's just really cool. Like, I'm not sure, if you or people are familiar with it. Post rock in general is just this very like atmospheric, it's like kind of heavy, but not too heavy, very instrumental, atmospheric sort of music. And it's, like I said, it just, when I listen to that it helps me, whatever I'm doing. I feel like I can really sort of dial in, and I feel like eventually it kind of helps set the tone for Territory also. Just because, depending on what I was listening to, it would have kind of different feels. And I was kind of just realizing that I was incorporating whatever that was into the story, which was awesome. Like, I think it helped. I think it enhanced everything. I think that, so that was a really cool part of it too, was, not a genre of music I think I would have discovered if I hadn't done this, but now that I found it, it's one that I really like.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. I feel the same way. Like, there's even days that, even doing my regular job, like I work from home, so I can actually listen to music instead of when I work in the office, like I will be tomorrow, and I won't be able to listen to music. And so it'll just be like awful all day. But when I'm home, like, there are times that I would, go to put on like my go-to, punk rock, whatever, of New Found Glory or Rancid or, anything like that. And then like, I even feel times where I'm like, that's too much. I gotta, no, just please stop. And I'll flip it to like, instrumental, like synth wave,
Yep.
or like that for me is an easy, I can put that on, and it's energetic enough that I'm not falling asleep listening to it like I do when I listen to classical music,
Right.
but it's not distracting either. So, because yeah, if I'm listening to like any sort of rap or any sort of, anything that has words that I know, I can't do anything else, because then I start singing along and like I'm going through the lyrics in my head, or I'm thinking about what I was doing when this album came out or whatever.
Yep.
And I just get totally distracted. And so it's like, I got to have something I'm familiar ish with, but not so familiar with that I know every word and all the stories and all the things. Like, I could never listen to Blink 182 if I have to focus on something, because
Right.
every song of theirs is just a memory marker for me. So, but yeah, post rock, that's a good one. I haven't heard that yet, so I appreciate that. That's also like, I got a buddy that got really big into post rock, and he was like, no man, you gotta, and I just wasn't ready to listen to it yet. So maybe this week I'm gonna have to check that out and see if I'm ready now to listen to it again.
Well, I'm with you, man. Like, because I still have, a lot of other music I listen to other times, and it's not something I listen to like in the car or anything usually. But when I do need to, when I do want to sit down and focus, but it does, like that, when that's on, I just feel locked in. It's great to have something like that you can turn to.
Yeah. And it's even better to know that what that thing is.
Hmm.
Like if you're like, I got to get this stuff done, like I have to just drill in and focus. And then knowing that you can put that on, I'm sure like helps get the creative juices flowing and all this stuff, and productivity is, yeah, that's a big win for sure. Let me see. Oh, when you started Territory, did you have this 5 issue arc already planned, or was it just like, I want to start here and like see what happens?
So I had, I mean, so like I said, before I started really working on Territory as a comic, I had the idea for the story. So by the time I was ready to, by the time I really started working on actually putting something together, I had a pretty good idea of, the beginning and ending. And then, the next step was obviously, okay, well, how do I do that? How do I execute it? And so the original plan was actually, it was going to be 6 issues. And that's one thing I will say, guaranteed 100% to all new comic creators: hire an editor, because that is probably the biggest, where I've learned the most from. Like I said, Nicole DeAndrea, she wasn't on issue 1 because I didn't have any editor on issue 1. And that, I think, is by far my biggest mistake with Territory. And if I could go back and do one thing over, it would be hiring her for issue 1 from the start, to see the whole thing. But so, it was originally going to be 6 issues. I had to kind of define start and end. As we were going through it, working with her, editing it, basically, with those last 2 issues, kind of combine them into this issue. That's why it's a little bit bigger. But I feel like it is a lot more effective than the final 2 issues were going to be. There was some stuff that felt pretty fillery. Even as I was writing it, it was just kind of like, man, I just need to fill, 5 or 6 more pages. And so being able to edit it down to now this one sort of big issue for the finale, it's great because I feel like this is the story I wanted to tell. There's things, little details and stuff I thought of in my head that, didn't make it in, but this is a story. This hits all the beats. This, reading this, you get everything that I wanted to, put into this story. I think you get out of it. So it was, going into it, and because this was my first comic project, I did want to have something with a defined start and end, just because I think, it's great to have that freedom of an ongoing series, but it is also a pretty big challenge, especially if you are like, cool, I have this really cool idea. And then you do that part and you're like, well, now I have to keep going with it, but I didn't really have, anymore. Like, and then unfortunately you see stuff fall off, when that does happen. So I didn't want that to happen. I wanted to make sure, okay, I want to tell one story. I want to tell it start to end, and I want to, show that I can finish it, can do it. And, I got to do that with Territory. And so that was the goal going in. And I feel like we've been able to accomplish that, which is really cool.
That's awesome. Yeah. I agree with the ongoing, like that feels very ominous of just like,
yeah.
Cause then suddenly it's, well, I gotta keep churning this thing out. And like, I mean, like you said, even if you get the things that you're like, no, this is going to be awesome. Like I'm going to have this thing. And then you do that. And like, then what?
Right. Well, and that's the thing is you just don't want to, I feel like, especially with something like this, you don't want to dilute any of it, right? Like you put so much work into these characters and building this story arc, and you don't want to just be like, well, now I just have to have them do something because I have to have, this many more pages or another issue or whatever. And then you do something that you're like, well, but that wasn't really like what I wanted, and I feel like that just, I know for me, that would really bother me. And so like, I honestly, I don't think I could ever do an ongoing series for that reason. Like I think mine would have to be very arc based, just because, being able to tell that, because it also, the other nice thing is you're not tied to anything. You're not like, well, I want this to happen, but it'll affect this character down the line, so I can't do that. I need to, like if you've got your story, you can, your characters are a part of that story, and what happens to them is part of that story. So, whatever needs to happen will happen, and you don't have to worry about, oh, well, this will, come back and bite me, 20 issues down the line or something.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's great insight. Because that's not something that I think I would have been thinking of if like I sat down to actually flesh out any of the ideas that I've had. Like that, to think that far ahead, or like at looking at the picture as a whole from maybe like the 3,000 foot level of, okay, if this is the whole thing that I'm going to be doing, anything that I do in the first half is going to impact the second half. And so thinking about stuff like that and what you're putting your characters through that's great. So do you know, I know we're not there yet, but do you know what comes next for you after Territory? Are you even thinking about that yet?
So I have some thoughts. Like I haven't worked on anything. Well, I shouldn't say I haven't worked on anything. I haven't really dove into anything else because I did want to, like, finishing this has been the priority because, this has been like, I've felt so fortunate to work on this, to see it get to where it's at. And I really want to make sure that we finish it strong. And so that, we can look back once it's finished and be proud of what we've got. So, but I do have a couple other ideas. The cool thing about finishing this, though, is it has given me the confidence and sort of inspired me to be like, okay, I can do this. I set out to tell this story. I set out to make this, and now we're here, we're doing it. So, if I know I can do this. So is there anything, are there any other stories I want to tell? And I've got two kind of other ideas that, I would like to work on. And we'll see how and what happens with them. This was definitely like coming in. This was the story I wanted to tell and put all my focus in. But now that I've done it, I feel like maybe I can, expand a little bit and try a couple other things. So I'm excited to see where it goes. But Territory is still definitely the main focus. And it is interesting because, this was a beginning 10 story that I had. But now that we're here, I have some ideas of like, well, there are some other things that could happen. So it's definitely something I'm kind of letting at least roll around in the back of my mind of, if I do want to come back to this and what that would look like and where we'd go.
That's cool. Yeah. Never say never, right?
No.
So that's it for my official questions. However, that's not it for you. I'm not done yet. So when I get to a point where I run out of questions and I've gotten all of the answers that I was seeking, which I appreciate the way that your mind works is very tactical. And it seems like you're very much a planner and you've got things that are all like everything is within view for you, which I just think is like, that's a great skill or ability or whatever that word is to have as a creator, because I think it's going to just continue to benefit you. So, but when I get to the end of my questions, I like to turn the floor over to you. So part of the reason that I love doing this show is because I get to A, talk with really cool indie comics creators, B, talk about stuff that we love, and C, like just try and signal boost and give creators a platform to spread their voice. So this is the part of the episode where I stop talking and I let you share anything that you've got on your heart, on your mind, you want people to hear. It could be about Territory. It could be about why pine needles are better than oak tree leaves. I have no idea why that's the thing that just came to my mind, but it was. The content isn't really what I'm concerned about. I just want to make sure that you have a platform to share anything that you're thinking. So the floor is yours, my friend.
Well, thank you. I mean, honestly, I just, as an indie creator, having the hardest thing for me has been, getting the word out. And it's a very frustrating feeling. It's feeling like you have this really cool project, this really cool story, but not knowing how to get it to people. And so having shows like this, having people like you that do help spread the word and help get the word out there for people and give people a platform to, not only talk about their projects, but the why behind. And so people can kind of see like, oh, this is, it's not just what I see on Twitter. This is, why they're doing it. This is what they're making. So just, having these sort of platforms to come in, to talk, to get to, hear from people who really enjoy the book and, and get to talk to you about the book, but then also sort of, explain for everyone else, like, why this book, why do we do it? So I just really, really appreciate, I appreciate, and like with the network and everything that you work with as far as spreading that positivity, spreading the word, like that kind of stuff. I'll say as an indie creator, I don't think we can ever thank you guys enough, because without people to help us spread the word, we wouldn't be able to do this. So thank you very much for having me on, for giving me a chance to, talk. It's been a lot of fun. I just really appreciate, that this community is so supportive, and that we have, people out there who are trying to make it happen, not only for themselves, but for everyone else. So thank you very much. And I appreciate it. And I'm excited to wrap this up and to see what the community thinks.
Awesome. Well, appreciate you saying that. I always love hearing feedback from creators that like this is a helpful thing. So, because it's why, like, when I started this, I had no idea that it was going to be what it is.
Right.
I honestly was just like, I just want to talk comics with people that are making them, because like maybe eventually someday I want to make a comic. And until then, like if I just talk to people and use my broadcasting background to make this thing to come together, like cool. And then after like 2 episodes, I was like, oh, this is gonna be like my focus shifted, and it suddenly wasn't like I don't even care about making my thing maybe eventually. Like now it's just like I just want to talk to cool people. Like every episode I just keep talking to these really awesome people. So I love the indie comics community. Anybody that has been paying attention to this show should know that. And I love Territory, man. Like it's not lip service. I'm surrounded by your stuff because it's such a cool series, and it's a really cool book, and I can't wait to have issue 5 in my hand. I love that you're calling it a behemoth episode. That's so on brand, or a behemoth issue. I have episodes and issues, but that's a separate conversation. The last thing that I'm going to do is in the mindset of having guests be able to portray themselves as they want to be seen. I'm going to take a screenshot for the YouTube thumbnail, so we can pose however you want to pose as I get my keyboard shortcut here, and we will go in 3, 2. Yeah, I get the fingers lined up. There we go. 1. Cool. All right.
Love it.
So I'll use those, and that'll be posted on YouTube. And if you've been listening to this on any podcasting platform, just go to the show description, this episode description, tap on the link to get to the Kickstarter, join the pre-launch, or if you're listening to this after it is already launched, which is also awesome, please just go back Territory issue 5 and get the whole shebang if you are new to the series, because it's definitely worth your time. So that's it, man. We got through another great conversation. We talked all sorts of stuff, and I had a blast talking with you, Blake. Yeah, that's going to be it for this episode. Sound cool?
Yeah. Well, like I said, thanks for having me on. It was a lot of fun, man. I really enjoyed it.
Awesome. Well, what's a good podcast without a good closing line? And I have one. So go do what's good for you, punks, and read some indie comics. Until next time, we are out of here.